Good morning, America's George Stephanopoulos sat down with Secretary of State Antony Blinken for a wide-ranging interview on Putin's recent moves, why his declaration of martial law, according to Blinken, speaks to Putin's desperation, and a host of other issues across the globe.
What's your reaction to Vladimir Putin's declaration of martial law?
I think it's another sign of Putin's desperation. Just in the last few weeks, he's tried to mobilize more forces. He's gone through with this sham annexation of Ukrainian territory. Now, in saying that he's declaring martial law in places that he claims have people who somehow want to be part of Russia, that speaks to his desperation.
But also in parts of Russia, it seems like he's preparing for all-out war.
What we've seen already in the steps that Putin's taken, going increasingly after the civilian population in Ukraine, indiscriminately bombing, targeting even power plants, bombs falling on schools, on hospitals, that's pretty close.
How much worse will it get if he has to retreat from Kherson?
Look, it's hard to predict where he's going to go and what he's going to do. Our purpose is simple. It's to stand with the Ukrainians to make sure that their country remains independent, and ultimately to have the strongest possible hand at a negotiating table if one emerges, because President Zelensky has said himself, at some point this is going to end through diplomacy.
But he also said he's not going to negotiate with Vladimir Putin, only with the next Russian president.
Well, he's been clear that diplomacy is going to have to bring this to an end at some point, but what we've seen thus far is no interest on the part of Putin in meaningful diplomacy. Right now, this is playing out on the battlefield, and it's playing out in a way that is allowing the Ukrainians to get back the territory that was taken by force from them. Not only an aggression against the Ukrainian people and Ukraine, but an aggression against the basic principles that we've been trying to uphold for many, many years, including the principles that are in the United Nations Charter, that say that one country can't simply redraw the borders of another by force. It can't go in and take land from another country. If we allow that to go forward with impunity, then we're opening a Pandora's box around the world, where aggressors of one kind or another are going to think they can get away with it, they can do it. That's a recipe for conflict. That's a recipe for chaos. It's why it's so important that the world has stood with Ukraine.
Your read, the read of so many military analysts right now, is that Vladimir Putin is losing this war. He's desperate. If he responds with nuclear weapons, what happens? We've
been very clear with President Putin, directly and privately, about the severe consequences that would follow from any use of a nuclear weapon. We're watching this very, very carefully. We have not seen reason at this point to change our own nuclear posture.
So you think he's still rational?
Look, it's hard to put yourself in someone else's mind. I think he's rational, but the decisions he's making, or maybe better put, his objectives, are not rational. He thought he could eliminate Ukraine as an independent country. That was wrong. He thought he could divide the Western Alliance, NATO. That was wrong. On the contrary, it's stronger than ever. He thought he could divide us at home. That was wrong. We have a very strong bipartisan approach to Ukraine that's been a hallmark of everything we've done. So I think the rationality of his objectives is what we can question.
We have a strong bipartisan unity right now on the issue of Ukraine, but the House Republican leader, Kevin McCarthy, said just the other day that if he's Speaker next year, the people cannot expect a blank check to Ukraine. It sounds like that aid is in danger.
Well, there's never a blank check. We're always going to make sure that what we're doing is consistent with our own interests, our own objectives. But our interests and our objectives right now, and I think this is true on a bipartisan basis, are to make sure that we're doing everything we reasonably can to support Ukraine, to allow it to defend itself, to help it as necessary rebuild, to make sure that we're exerting as much pressure as we can on Putin to end his aggression, and also to make sure that we're strengthening our own defensive alliance, NATO. We've done all of those things. We've done it on a bipartisan basis. I believe that'll continue.
More and more Republican elected officials and candidates are questioning the aid to Ukraine. Are you concerned about that if Republicans take control of Congress next year?
All I can say at this point, George, is that to date, this has been a strong bipartisan effort, and I've seen it across the board. I've been with members of Congress from both parties in Ukraine, in Poland, in many neighboring countries. We spent a lot of time working very closely with Congress on this, and I think the support is there. It'll continue. The other thing that's so important is we're getting other countries to step up to make sure that they're providing that support, that they're not only the United States, but many other countries. In fact, there are dozens of countries that Secretary of Defense Austin brings together on a regular basis to make sure that the weapons, the tools that Ukrainians need to defend themselves are getting there. We're making sure as well that other countries are stepping up when it comes to supporting Ukraine financially.
Russia is getting other countries to step up as well. We've seen them using these Iranian drones.
It's a sign that the sanctions that we imposed, including these export controls, have been denying Russia much of the technology it needs to replace what it's using up or to build new things. So it's having to look around the world wherever it can to find more weapons to continue to prosecute its aggression in Ukraine.
Iran is doing this, of course, as they're facing these massive protests in the streets of Iran right now. How much of a threat to their regime are these protests?
What we're seeing is extraordinary. Young people, especially women and girls, standing up at great risk to themselves for their basic rights, to be treated with dignity, to literally be able to wear what they want to wear and not be forced to wear something they don't want to wear. And it's been young people, and it's been women, and it's been girls who are at the forefront of this movement. It's also from the grassroots. It's spontaneous, and we see it all around Iran. Now, it's very hard to predict where this is going to go, and ultimately, this is about the Iranian people. It's not about us. It's not about any other country. It's about what they want, what they're entitled to, and if the regime listens to them and responds, that'll be one thing. If it doesn't, this could go in a very different direction, but it's hard to predict where it'll go.
Former President Obama said just the other day he wished he would have done more during the Green Revolution in Iran. Are we doing enough now?
Not only are we speaking out and standing up in solidarity with those who are putting their lives at risk for their freedoms, but we're taking action. We've imposed sanctions on the so-called morality police, the ones who are cracking down on Iranians for simply speaking their minds or wearing what they want to wear. We're also imposing sanctions on those who are aiding and abetting the violence, the repression. Equally important, George, we've tried to do everything we can to make sure that the technology that Iranians need to allow them to communicate with each other, as well as to be connected to the outside world, is able to get to them, to get to Iran. So we've made sure that none of our sanctions are blocking technology companies and others from getting that technology to Iranians. We'll continue to look for ways, both with other countries as well as ourselves, to put pressure on those who are repressing the Iranian people and to help the Iranians themselves be able to reach out and connect.
Let's talk about China. President Xi about to embark on another term. You said just the other day that you're now convinced that China is going to seek reunification with Taiwan on a much faster timeline. What does that mean?
For many, many years, there was a basic understanding when it came to Taiwan. Whatever differences existed between Beijing and Taiwan would be resolved peacefully. What changed is this, a decision that was made in Beijing some years ago that was no longer acceptable, and that the government wanted to speed up the reunification and to do it
by any means necessary.
Potentially by any means, through coercion and pressure, and potentially, if necessary, by force. That's the fundamental change. And the entire world has a stake in this, in making sure that there is peace and stability along the Taiwan Straits. The amount of trade and commerce that goes through that strait every day is essential to world economies. And you know this as well. Taiwan is the major manufacturer of semiconductors. Our smartphones, our dishwashers, our automobiles, they all have chips in them. A lot of that's manufactured in Taiwan. If that's disrupted, that would have a major impact on the world economy.
But China is so much larger than Taiwan. If they want to take Taiwan at some point, they're just going to do it, aren't they?
We're committed to doing everything we can to make sure that Taiwan has the ability to effectively defend itself against aggression. And we've also made very clear to China that our expectation is these differences will be resolved peacefully, and that no one on either side does anything to change the status quo unilaterally or by force. Beijing's going to have to make its own calculations, its own decisions, but what we've said and what we've been very clear about is that preserving the status quo, making sure that these differences are resolved peacefully, is essential. It's not only essential to us, I think it's essential to countries around the world. And I suspect that Beijing is hearing this, again, not just from us, but from many other countries.
You know, Wall Street Journal had a pretty striking editorial the other day. They said that China now presents the most formidable challenge to U.S. national security that we faced since World War II. Do you agree with that?
China does represent a profound challenge because here's what's happening. This is an inflection point for the world. The post-Cold War era is over, and there is a competition underway to shape what comes next. China would like to shape what comes next, and it wants a a world order, but one that's profoundly illiberal. We want a world order that is liberal in its nature. So there's a competition underway about shaping what that looks like. China has the military, the economic, the political, diplomatic strength to play a major role in shaping that order. So they can, if left unchecked in that sense, move things in a different direction. We're not looking for conflict. We're not trying to contain China. We don't want another Cold War. But we are determined, and we will stand up for our basic interests and our basic values.
We don't want one, but are we in one?
We're not in one, but we're also standing up very resolutely for our own values, for our own interests. It's a competition as well. There's, by the way, nothing wrong with competition. It's what our country is founded on, as long as it's fair, as long as there's a level playing field. And that's what we're working on. And we're doing two things to make sure that not only are we competing, but we're competing successfully. First of all, we're investing in ourselves. That's the smartest thing we can do. And we've just seen a great example of that. The investment that was just made, again, on a bipartisan basis, in our ability to continue to lead in the technology that's the building block of the 21st century economy, the computer chip, semiconductors, that is something that's extraordinarily significant. It's going to allow us to keep our technological edge. That's critical. The other piece that's critical is doing everything we can to be in alignment, to be in sync with other countries, with allies and partners around the world, so that we're taking the same approach. When China's engaged in some kind of unfair economic practice, and we're trying to get them to change it, if we're doing it alone, we're, 20, 25% of the world's economy, the world's GDP. When we're doing it in concert with European allies, with Asian allies, it might be 50 or 60% of the world's economy telling China, no, you can't continue to do this. You can't continue to engage in unfair practices. Similarly, we want to make sure that if China's investing in countries around the world, there's nothing wrong with investment, nothing wrong with trade. The trade's got to be fair. The investment, we just have to be very careful that it's not in strategic sectors, strategic companies that could pose a threat to our security. And again, the more we're doing that with allies and partners, the more effective we're going to be.
President Biden about to announce this afternoon release of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve at a time when Saudi Arabia is not cooperating on the energy front. And that's led many of the president's allies to question whether Saudi Arabia is actually an ally anymore.
The step that Saudi Arabia and the OPEC Plus organization took was one that was deeply unfortunate and also deeply misguided. To the extent that this causes oil prices to go up and Russia's exporting oil, it's helping to line Putin's pockets. Second, we're all trying to restore economic growth. That's exactly the wrong time to engage in production cuts. And to the extent that they're concerned about oil prices going down, if things are going in a direction that they really don't like, they can make a decision then. But there was no reason to make the decision when they made it.
So that's not the actions of an ally, is it?
In this instance, it's not. But we have a multiplicity of interests with Saudi Arabia. And we have to make sure that we're accounting for all of those interests. We have a strong interest in stability in the region. We have an interest in seeing stronger, more positive relations between Israel and Arab countries, something that we're working on. We have an interest in bringing the war in Yemen to an end. By many accounts, this is the worst humanitarian situation in the world. That requires Saudi Arabia's cooperation. And in fact, they have cooperated in trying to bring the war to an end. We have an interest, of course, in pushing back against extremism and the potential for terrorism. And Saudi Arabia in the past has been a partner on that. So all of these things have to be in the mix. But the president's been very clear about our feelings about the step that Saudi Arabia took and OPEC Plus took. And of course, we're taking steps to make sure that energy gets on the market so that the demand is actually met by supply, including, for example, additional releases from our own Strategic Petroleum Reserve.
We spent the last 20 minutes going through all the challenges facing the United States right now. And, when I talk to friends and family, and they wake up to the headlines every day, they say it seems to them that the world is more dangerous now than it's ever been. What do you say to them?
I say, yes, it is dangerous. It is complicated. It is full of challenge. And part of it is because we know what's happening around the world in real time in ways that we never did before. And that creates a sense that things are a little bit more chaotic and a little bit more dangerous. But at the same time, I'm also seeing incredible opportunities. One of the first instructions I got from President Biden in taking this job was to re-energize our partnerships, to rejuvenate them, to re-engage, because most of the problems that we actually have to solve, that people are worried about, climate change, health, and COVID, the way these new technologies are shaping our lives, we have to be able to work with other countries. That's what our diplomacy is all about. Later today, here in Philadelphia, I'm going to get a chance to swear in some new American citizens. One of the parts of my job that gives me the greatest satisfaction.
Your face just lit up.
It's the renewal of our country. Let me be one of the first lucky people to say, welcome home, my fellow Americans. My late stepfather, he became a citizen of the United States, and he used to say to me, you know, you are an American citizen by a very happy accident of birth. I'm an American by choice. That's a very powerful thing. That's what carries our country forward.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.